E-bikes are massively popular, especially in Europe, for commuting because they're very practical and they make cycling easy for people who wouldn't necessarily otherwise want to ride a bike. Being a massive roadie dork, however, I'm not a huge fan of your standard flat bar e-bike because I like the multiple hand positions that drop bars offer, and I like the illusion of being a roadie even if I am in fact cheating by using motorised assistance. I recently moved house to somewhere 20 miles away from BikeRadar headquarters. Now, 20 miles isn't too long for a normal bike ride, but with all the associated messing around with kit and having showers at both ends, it's just a bit too time consuming when you're also toiling at the coalface of the bike industry for 9 hours a day in between. An e-bike has the potential to be a lot quicker for the same amount of effort, or potentially just a lot less effort. So that could be a real solution. Maybe even I wouldn't have to break a sweat as much and I could get away with not showering. Not sure about that one. I decided to try my commute on the giant Erode E, which is an aluminium framed drop bar road bike with a Yamaha power unit and a big old battery that's nicely integrated into the down tube. Initially, getting on the Erode E, I had that classic e-bike thing where I just thought, this is ridiculously fun because it just feels so stupidly easy to accelerate. The thing is that between 0 miles an hour and 15.5 miles an hour, which is roughly the speed that the bike's limited to, it's pretty much the quickest thing in an urban setting because you have that big burst of torque that gets you up to speed. Right near the start of my commute, there's quite a large hill, something which I generally avoid cycling up on normal bikes because it's narrow, it's very heavily trafficked, and it's just really unpleasant having cars trying to push past you on it. On the Erode E, I just didn't really worry about it. I didn't put a great deal of effort in, but in the highest mode on the bike, which is called power mode, I just pootled up, kind of, not soft pedaling, but kind of putting in a gentle effort, and I thought nothing of it. It was really easy and very pleasant. So initially, great. Almost the whole rest of my commute is actually fairly flat. It's got kind of gentle rolling up and down. And that means that on a normal bike, I would generally hope to be averaging something around, say, 18 miles an hour. On the Erode E, that of course means that you're not getting any benefit at all from the electric motor because it cuts out completely above about 16 miles an hour. The way it works is the official limited speed is 25 kilometers an hour, which is 15.5 miles an hour. But in reality, it kind of tapers around that point, so you don't get a hard cutoff. On a flat road, when you're riding faster than the limit, you are simply pedaling quite a heavy bike. Now, if you're just trundling along, that doesn't really matter very much because it's only when you're accelerating that you feel that extra weight. Or when you get out of the saddle and you try and throw the bike around, you suddenly become a lot more aware of it. I found that I spent a lot of time hovering just above the limiter speed, around kind of 17 miles an hour. And then I'd drift back very slightly and the motor would kind of blip on, and then that little blip of power would send me back over the limiter speed. So I was constantly dipping in and out in a kind of yo-yo, which is quite annoying actually. The problem is that the relationship between the effort you put in and the speed you get out is not really proportional, and that can mess with your head. Up to 15.5 miles an hour, you can put in very, very little effort if you want to. It obviously will depend on what power mode you're in. There's 3 on this particular bike, but basically you don't have to do any work at all if you don't want to. If you want to go faster than 15.5 miles an hour, you're suddenly putting in much more effort. So it's no effort, no effort, no effort, up to 15.5. Suddenly, boom, huge effort. And I found that when I was riding along and suddenly losing that power assist, it was a little bit like somebody grabbing my bike by the saddle and just gently pulling me back. Another curious thing is the way the bike encourages you to ride, because I found that something about the way the assist comes in makes you ride at a lower cadence than you normally would. Roadies tend to want to ride for efficiency on a normal bike at something around 80 to 100 RPM, typically they aim for about 90. On the Erode E, I often found I was down in the kind of 70, 80 area. That doesn't necessarily matter, but it could give you bad habits when you switch back to your normal bike. It's fair to say that it's partly just a case of getting used to how the electric power comes in. From a ride quality point of view, there was another thing I noticed with the Erode, which might be specific to this bike or might generally affect road bikes, but it's that the bike wasn't as comfortable as I was expecting. So it has 32mm tyres, which is really big for a road bike, but it's a very heavy bike, and I was running slightly higher pressures than I normally would, around 70 psi, but not ridiculous. Even so, I didn't find it as comfortable as I was expecting on UK roads. I've ridden this bike before on very smooth European roads, but it was noticeably less comfortable when I was battering through potholes in the UK. It may be that I was being overly conservative with my pressures out of fear of puncturing, but I was very conscious that because the bike weighs so much, it's not as nimble and I can't easily kind of hop over stuff in the way that I would on a normal bike. I think if this were my bike, I would run it tubeless and try and get the pressures quite a bit lower. One thing that really impressed me was battery life. So I did a roughly 20-mile commute each way and didn't charge the bike during the day. I used the bike almost exclusively in its highest power mode, and at the end of the day I still had 46% battery left, which I think is pretty damn impressive. So are road bikes perfect for commuting? For me personally, they aren't because of the terrain that I ride. However, I think there are many people who really would benefit from a bike like this. If you're not so fit that you're generally going to be riding faster than that 16-mile-an-hour speed, then the limiter thing won't bother you at all. Or if you have a commute that's really, really hilly, you'll absolutely love it. Equally, going downhill on a bike like this is fun because it's got really good brakes, nice big tyres, so there's no worry about grip. It's quite a rewarding bike to ride. If you're commuting long distances and you've got some challenging terrain, I think a road bike is the best possible option. For this bike to make sense, you've got to have exactly the right commute and you've got to be the right person for the bike though. It is kind of a niche within a niche at the moment. But if you did away with that limiter, it would be an entirely different ballgame. We know there are people out there that have hacked their e-bikes to remove the limiter. It's illegal and we don't condone doing that. If the law were to change, even raising that limiter speed to say 18 miles an hour, 20 would be better, but 18 would be a big improvement. We think that bikes like this could be a viable car replacement for a huge number of people, and personally I'm excited to see where they're going to go.